Okay, how's this? Cool. Hi. Yes. As a note, yeah, if you're presenting, you will be speaking up here. There is a camera that is capturing us that will be projected onto the live stream. So if you've got a large group, just center around this. Yeah, yeah. Save it for afterwards. Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome in. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to IGDA Twin Cities, our game dev meeting, every second Wednesday from 6:30 to 9:30. Oh, boy. The remote is up. So for today, if you just show up to this regularly and you're not familiar with what's happening specifically today, we've got some wonderful presentations from UW Stout's capstone class showing off the work that they've spent over the last academic year working on their senior projects. Oh, good heavens. Woo! Yeah. Yippee. So welcome. IGDA Twin Cities is an inclusive space welcoming anybody who is interested in games, making games, talking about games, playing games. We've got options for everyone. And we're all volunteer. We've got a board of people that help run these events. Here's some of them. I'm up there now. As of a year ago, I was not. It's a pleasure. This could be any of you. This could be any of you showing up here. So if you're interested, if you have ideas to help this community grow, if you're interested in getting invested in your local community post-graduation, feel free to show up to more events, such as, oh, we got our volunteers as well, wonderful cornerstones of the community as well. If you don't want to be on the board, if you don't want the responsibility or just the scary title, be a volunteer. Do the same amount of work or less. Whatever you want. It's a do-ocracy. So if you're interested in showing up to some of our other events, they're all on Wednesdays, more or less. We've got a different event each Wednesday of the week. Starting off every first Wednesday, it's Devs Play Games. It's a social event. Come play board games, video games, any games that you're interested in sharing with other people, getting feedback on, especially if you want to play test board games. It's a great opportunity to do it, and just get to meet other game developers and people interested in games in the Twin Cities area. Our second Wednesday, that's today, is the Gamedev Meeting. There will usually be people talking, there will be socializing, mingling, we'll have presentations about various industry topics and things of interest. Our Twin Cities playtest is the third week. That'll be at a different venue. The first two are here at the Nerdery. The third event, our playtest, is at Noble Robot, which is a little bit further towards central Minneapolis. And that is an opportunity for people to playtest games in person or have their games playtested in person or remotely. That event is also live streamed. If you're interested in joining in, you can catch that online on our YouTube channel. And then our fourth event of the month is the VR HCI event, which is similar-ish to the Game Dev Meetup, but usually more focused on topics of VR, human-computer interaction, AR, any of the specific technical aspects of that realm of game development. And then we've got some special interest groups that meet on times that are not Wednesdays. We've got our Women in Games Gathering, which is the third Saturday of the month. It's a no-agenda networking social event from 6:30 to 8:30, also at Noble Robot. Oh, and backtracking. The VR HCI event is at REM 5, which is a different location from the other two. There's a bunch of different locations. Information, if you're interested in any of these events, will be posted with their event info on Eventbrite and Discord. Jumping back forward. Yep, Women in Games, Noble Robot, 6:30 to 8:30 every third Saturday. And then the fourth Saturday of the month is the People of Color Get-Together. Similar agenda, which is nothing. Just a socializing, hanging out, networking event from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m., also at Noble Robot. So if any of these interest you, feel free to show up. And if you're interested in proposing your own ideas, if you've got things you'd like to see in the community or other events that just fit somewhere else in the monthly schedule, feel free to shout them out. Talk to anybody on the board about these ideas or email us at igdatwincities@gmail.com and give us your ideas. We're always willing to listen. We've also got, if you're in our Discord, a Games and Projects channel where you can link projects that you're working on and post updates about them so that people in your community can get updates. So if you've got projects that you're working on that you'd like to get some more visibility on, or you just want some sort of accountability system to keep yourself working on a project, this could be a great option for you. Join our Discord. And finally, if you're really into supporting the community, we've got merch now. merch.igdatc.org. Support it. Buy a shirt. The money goes straight to us, and we'll support your community and your events. Now, we've got our news, plugs, and announcement, which I think is nothing. Unless anybody has anything spur of the moment, yes?
All right, just want to quickly shout out 2DCon, which is coming up in August, especially if any of these fine college folks here are interested in showcasing their game to a broad audience later on down the road. That is an excellent opportunity. Indie Island Applications, which is the venue by which people can come and bring their games to show. Those applications are now open. I believe Trevor posted about that in Discord recently, but if you want more information, just reach out in the IGDA Discord, and someone will definitely get you connected. Also, it's just a fun event to attend, so even if you don't want to show off a game, come anyway.
Seconded. It's a great opportunity. I know we've had some people who have presented previous projects. Yes, yes? Yeah, a good avenue. I know some people are considering MDev for these senior projects as presentation avenues, but if you want a little warm-up or just another way to share your game with the community, check out 2DCon. Anybody else got anything for the good of the cause? Going once? Going twice? Otherwise, we will get this party started. So, for our presenters, we'll be going in alphabetical order, sort of. We'll be leading with Boogie Beyond, then we'll be showing off Hyperpop, then Land of Lights, then Ripple and Frog, and then we'll be showing Sun Shredder, and then Club Crash last. So, as I call you up, feel free to just circle up around here. We'll get your presentation set up. Perfect. Do we want to maybe save that one for Q&A? Oh, okay, perfect. So yeah, show off your stuff, slides and videos, and then we'll leave it open to Q&A. Come on up.
Okay.
Feel free to introduce
Hang on. Forward, back.
Forward, backward. You might need to lean a little forward, and it's also probably not set up until it starts presenting.
Oh, awesome. All right. Forward, backwards. Wonderful. All right, thank you so much, Sam, for the introduction. We are Boogie Beyond, and so, long story short, we are the VR dance game. It's 1988. You are a no-nonsense detective who's been tasked with infiltrating a mysterious nightclub known only as Club Cosmic. Groove your way through the otherworldly crowd looking for evidence, dance battle against the glamorous monsters who try to stop you, and ultimately uncover the figure behind all the smoke and mirrors, or succumb to the boogie fever. So I am Sarah Zebarth. I was the game's producer.
I am Peyton Ness, and I was the dance manager, kind of.
I'm Melina Parker, and I worked in object destruction.
And then we are joined online by Nick King. I'm not sure if he'll be able to speak or not. Nick King joining online. Okay.
Nick, can you hear us? Wait, hold on.
All right, well, Nick was one of our art
Nick,
managers,
are you here?
specifically in charge of level design and layout.
Yeah, you're muted if you're here, Nick.
Oh, sorry about that.
There you go.
Yes.
There we go.
All right. Yes, for level design and layout, quickly, where can I see this a little bit? It's a little all over the place for viewing it, the presentation, but I will say main thing we focused on for Boogie Beyond was kind of making sure s- the space just felt correct for players to just walk in and feel that things felt correct in VR, as well as capture that beyondness we were going for our kind of Boogie Beyond aesthetic of disco kind of corrupted by the Eldritch Reach, and making sure that both things felt real to the player and progression wise fell in line with what we were looking for. That was a lot with the level, just trying to make sure that things flowed well. It wasn't too big, too small, but had enough room for the player to just explore, grab things, and just overall just enjoy what they're going through. And kind of just having fun with it. It was a lot of the end of the day, just making sure that the experience and the scale fit with our game was a big part of development. Just a lot of testing out for making sure models fit the theme and aesthetic while keeping pace with everything fitting in the player's hands and allowing for the calibration we have for accessibility so people can play the game sitting down as well as all ages helps with making sure the environment adds to the effect rather than take away with it was one of our big things we're looking at.
Yeah, definitely. So, as you can probably tell at this point, our game is very heavily based in disco and 80s vibes. It is, as we mentioned, a VR game, and so these were some of our controls so that you could see how the player can interact with the environment that Nick was describing. We used a teleportation system. We had a notebook UI as a detective that helped you figure out where to go in the game, essentially lead you along the way if you weren't quite sure what you were supposed to be doing. And then we had obviously your normal select, grab, and turning mechanics. We also had 3 very fun characters. So first and foremost, you would meet our bouncer, who was the furthest to the left. He would essentially lead you in through the tutorial, and once you had kind of defeated him in the very first super easy dance battle, then you would then enter the club, whereupon you would eventually meet the diva Heathers, who was essentially based off of the iconic Madonna or Valley Girl character. And eventually you would make your way to the final level where you would face the boss of the club themselves, who is, of course, the titular boogeyman. Obviously, as this was a dance battle game, we wanted to go super big into audio and music. We got to team up with 3 wonderful audio people from the Berklee College of Music, and each of these characters kind of has their own semi-unique sound depending on where you're at in the game. So for example, you start with the bouncer who feels a little more 80s, and then you get to Heathers, who's a little bit earlier 80s, late 70s, and eventually make your way to the boogeyman, who is purely 70s. All right. And we are planning on releasing this to Steam eventually. It is otherwise available on itch. This QR code leads to our website, where you can learn some more about the development specifically with our blog posts. And you can follow our social media from there, as well as find it on Steam, or on itch, sorry. And then if we could bring up our trailers, that would be awesome. So a particularly cool aspect of our game as well that I didn't quite mention, we teamed up with the UW Stout dance team to choreograph the dances that each of our characters would be doing, and had them record those dances in motion capture suits so that we can then take those animations and apply them to our characters. So as you saw with the dance battles in the trailer, those animations are literally the choreography that real people were doing, which made it easier for people to actually do those dances in real life and attempt to follow along. And Peyton can go a little more in depth on the process, the very long, arduous process of creating those dance mechanics.
So the first problems that we had with actually getting people to dance is to actually figure out what makes people dance. We tried multiple UIs and tried to like help the player by supporting them, but since it was a 3D environment, more people were agitated to like look around, so we thought of objects coming towards them. But weirdly enough, when something flies towards you, you punch it. Don't know why, but everyone's first reaction was to just full on punch anything that came towards them. So after we moved on from that, we tried a 2D UI in the space that you would move to you in a 3D way. But then we realized that players are just trying to like mimic the moves without like feeling the beat or rhythm. So we tried adding pulsing to that. We tried making it farther away, add more like distance. I'm sorry, I'm so afraid to like blow out someone's ears. But after that, we finally decided to remove all UI and focus just on velocities of people's movements. So no matter like depending on height or where, if they're sitting, standing, to not worry about position, location, just to overall simplify the process. We actually have it set to the velocity, so I don't know. Yeah, it's not showing the dancing yet, but when the characters do their moves, like the boogeyman will move his arms up and down, we'll just check to make sure that the player's velocity with the controllers will move up and down. And then if the player is at least moving along or trying to mimic the dance, it's somewhat near it what they're doing and not just standing still, we started giving them points, and then with that, we started adding more juice by adding the notes, as you can see, trash, bogus, boogylicious, all the fun terminologies from that time period. But if anyone has any like specific questions, I would be willing to answer any of them. Cool. Oh,
How did you track whether or not the player's actually doing it right?
so we calculated their position, so we'll take their original position, and every second that it would change positions, we would calculate the velocity between those 2 points. Eventually, we then did that same thing. We added the controllers to like the character, not character models, but the models of like Heather, the bouncer, and other things to track their motions when they do the dance. So then we could have tables of just the velocity, like positive, negative. Since they were still in the same space, in a 3D space, we were able to then compare and contrast the difference in positions and then use that to calculate the average velocity between the movements. I hope that answers the question.
What inspired you to use dance and detectives in the same game, and do you feel like you pulled both of those aspects off well?
So our art manager, Sophia Burgess, was the person who initially pitched this game. And from the very beginning, we had a lot of general vague concepts about where we potentially wanted this to go. It was pitched as a VR game, a dance game, a dating sim, a eldritch thing. It had 80s vibes. There were so many wild different things, and as a team we managed to kind of narrow it down. Okay, so let's see, it makes sense if you are a detective, perhaps, going through this club, and that inspires you to want to explore the environment and interact with it and get to know kind of what's going on here. And that tied into, okay, you're there because there's this boogie fever that's going on, and you're trying to get down to the bottom of figuring out where that's coming from and why that's happening. And so there was a lot of struggle to start with, figuring out how to incorporate so many narrative points with being a detective and making sure that you got to dance and like go into the dance battles. And so I think ultimately we managed to connect it relatively well. If we were to continue development on this game, I think there are a lot more avenues that we would like to go down and explore with it. I mean, part of our challenge was we only had a year to put this together. So a lot of content either got cut or, you know, got shoved into a really small box as we continued working. Eric Gritzmacher was one of our programmers on the project, and specifically our narrative lead. He did an absolutely phenomenal job of taking all of those large concepts and putting them into a smaller smaller box that a player could actually get through within a semi-reasonable amount of time. He wrote all of our dialogue, and it's witty, it's charming, and I think it definitely captures the essence that we at least wanted to go for. So even if one doesn't necessarily experience like the whole story that we wanted to invoke, they are at least getting bits and pieces of it here and there. So we think we made it work.
How did you present the dialogue in the story? Is it through the ears, or am I reading it, or what?
So you're actually doing both. We did have voice recordings or voice acting. Funnily enough, I was actually one of the 2 voices that we used for Heather's. And then we did also have the dialogue written out. You may have noticed in the trailer that we had like dialogue boxes that would come up whenever a conversation was going on, in which you could read exactly what they're saying and also be hearing it at the same time.
So as the footage was rolling while you continued talking, I noticed that during the dance sections, there's these like 3 kind of ghostly after images of the character who's dancing, and it looks like they're designed to be kind of a few beats ahead of what the character is about to do.
Yeah.
Did you find that players figured that out and used it to help figure out what to do, or did it just kind of fly by them?
We had a mixed reaction to both, which why they're also really opaque, so you can kind of see through them. Some players choose to just completely ignore them and just try really hard to focus on the dance. Sometimes players would actually notice them and then figure out, oh, well, she moves faster than her, and then she moves faster than her. I'm just going to copy like the last one because I don't understand what I'm doing. And then some people who felt more experienced actually followed the second one. And like I think the dance team was like, I'm just going to follow Heather. I know this dance. But it really helped with like communicating like what you should be doing next and making sure that people were on time. But like here in the Boogeyman, as you can see, like you can't really see the one super far back, but if you focus on them, you can still see them in the headset. I know it's kind of hard, even though it's a video from the headset, that we can't just put you in the 3D space on a 2D screen. But we did figure out that some people used them, and the people who needed them the most used them the most, and the people who didn't need them ignored them.
Any other questions?
What was the biggest challenge for accomplishing this game as it related to making it a VR game? I know it was kind of pitched as a VR game from kind of the beginning, or was like the goal was always kind of to make it a VR game. I'm curious what point brought the most contention with it keeping it as a VR game.
So I would say everybody on the team was really excited to try and dive into the complexities of VR from the get-go. I don't know that ever really changed throughout the development. I think everybody continued to be really excited about doing it that way. I would think the biggest challenges that we came across, though, were figuring out how to optimize the level in a way that worked well. We had many issues with wanting to overload the level with lots of fun effects. So we wanted fog, we wanted disco lights, we wanted a disco ball, we wanted people dancing, any and all of that stuff that you would normally find in a club environment. And so trying to figure out how we could balance having those, or at least some of those, with keeping the frame rate at a decent level was a bit of a challenge. And Garrett Brown, who was our programming manager, did a really great job and spent a lot of time on going through every single one of those things whenever we would add something to the level and try to find a way to make it as optimized as it possibly could. Unfortunately, he's not with us. Otherwise, he would talk your ear off about all of the different things he did. It was really impressive and definitely a lot of work, but it seems to have paid off in the long run.
Well, maybe optimistically, we'll see you guys at one of the VR HCI meetings coming up. Could be a fun thing for people to hear about.
Yeah, mayhaps. That would be very fun. Thank you, thank you. Next up is
Hyperpop.
Hyperpop.
And then Land of Lights, you'll be on deck.
You guys can sit down. I'll pass off the mic. Okay, so this is forward, this is backwards.
Got it. That was so smooth.
Mike, get your mouth close to it.
Get to okay. Good to know.
The smooth floor, I'm gonna do it.
Hello, everyone. Looks like we're getting this thing set up. So, is this? Are we good? We good? Okay, cool. Am I too loud? Do I am talking too close? Let me know. Not sure. We'll give it a sec for the slides to pop up. How's everyone doing? Woo! Yeah, let's go. Okay. Yeah, we'll introduce ourselves while we're up here. I'm Colby, game lead, he, him. Colby Ward.
I'm Dom. I'm the level designer.
I'm Brandon. I'm the program lead.
I'm Jared. I'm one of the 3D generalists.
I'm Porter, 3D modeling and concept artist.
You can all call me Q. I'm the lead enemy designer and Scrum Lord.
And we, along with many more, are 2-minute games, and we created Hyperpop. So this is our game. So Hyperpop is a first-person movement shooter, and it takes place in the city of Paradise. Paradise City is a floating city amongst the stars, and it's created by Corpos. And Corpos is a great company that created this beautiful city, but they also have some dark secrets, maybe not so great of a company. One of those secrets is you. So this is Rosa, or Resident 54, and she is a normal street youth running around Paradise City, but after being apprehended for doing graffiti, she's brought into a lab and is secretly tested on and given enhancements. And these enhancements are what create the game. So these enhancements range from a few different things. Mainly, you have finger guns. These finger guns allow you to shoot a ton of different types of weapons, such as the pistol, rocket launcher, railgun, grenade, I said that, full auto shot. Yeah, there's a shotgun. There's a few different weapons, and we're workshopping those. And we also have on your other arm a grappling hook. So this allows you to swing around the city and do some really cool stuff. Also on your leg, you have a buzzsaw, which we are in love with at 2-minute games. The buzzsaw allows you to do a kick, a slide, a wall run, and a few different other things, and it really allows momentum to pick up while you move through the game. The game is heavily inspired by graffiti and comic book art, so we have a lot of graffiti throughout the game. We wanted it to have a sort of grunge feel and a sort of the comic book aesthetic as you move through. So you notice in the game we have a shader, and so that will come into play.
So we have 3 sections in our game. You first start out within the Corpos facility. This is basically our tutorial for you as the player. Closer? Okay, there we go. This is the tutorial for the player. This is where you learn all of your abilities and also get your first bit of just Corpos robots, which will be patrolling the areas and trying to stop you from actually escaping. Eventually, you escape the facility by reaching the top of what we call the Panopticon. It's this beautiful pink tower where at the top you see this little guy. Or actually, he's not little, he's very big. His name is Gomp. He is the first boss that you will encounter, and he has a lot of movesets that will try and stop you from escaping. Eventually, you will escape, and you will reach it to the skyline of the city. This is where we wanted to bring in a lot of like neon lights and just a hint of our graffiti that you can see hidden around some alleyways. One also thing that you might notice in that left side picture, the way that we help the player progress through the level to teach them where they should be going in case they get lost is graffiti arrows that some other residents have placed around the city to help you keep progressing further throughout the level. This is also where we first introduced a lot of our nice greenery that we used, and this helps actually use the grappling hook a lot. You can swing through the skyline, reach the top of the cityscape, and also just swing through the streets. Eventually, you reach what we call the Shrieker. This is a patrolling robot that just patrols the skies of the skyline and helps keep the citizens of Paradise safe, as Corpos would want. And the Shrieker will chase you down as you try to escape, and eventually the Shrieker will destroy the city and blow a hole for you to escape out of the city, which you will then fall into the Undercity, which is the left-away parts of Paradise City that Harold Saxman, the leader of Corpos, doesn't want anybody to see. This is where we brought our huge graffiti and just grunge feeling to play, with a lot of sewer tunnels, a lot of moss, a lot of just yuck green water, and a lot of darker vibes than what you see in Paradise City, which is nice and clean. Eventually, at the end of Undercity, you will reach your escape, where you will be met with the Hellraiser, which is this beautiful spidered robot designed by Q. He has multiple attacks as well that will stop you, and this is basically our climactic final ending to the storyline where Rosa is trying to escape. We can switch to the trailer.
Initiate phase 1.
So yeah, that was our trailer. Thanks. And then here we have the playthrough of the game as it starts out, and we'll have, this is Dom's playthrough, and we'll have just that going as we ask for some questions. So if anyone has any questions, don't all go at once, it's okay.
We're also going to fair warn, Dom is a speedrunner, so I don't know if he slows down in this, but he does go very fast. He is our movement programmer, so he did a lot of the slide tactics and basically made it so that you can go really fast or you can take your time in the game, and he is a god at it, so he goes very fast.
It looks like you have a lot of, or very large levels. I'm curious, what were some of the ways that you explored directing the player besides the arrows?
Yeah.
There's kind of a lot of different ways that I tried to do that beforehand, but the big thing that we kind of ran into a problem with is that a lot of our levels, especially in the skyline and once you get to the Undercity, are very open. There's a lot of different paths you can go down. There's like secrets you can explore for. There's like secret audio logs you can pick up to like learn more about the story. And designing around like a path, like a specific path for the player to follow is the best. I did that to the best of my abilities, but a lot of people just got really, really lost. So that's why like we tried to essentially use like kind of context clues where it's like, oh, here's a path that I want to like wall run down or like somewhere I want to slide down. Just kind of attracting players with movement options that they can use there. But that was not enough. That's what we ended up finding out, we tried another playtest with the arrows, and then we did a survey on all the playtesters, and I don't think a single one said that they didn't like the arrows. So we definitely had to keep them in. So, yeah.
We're just curious to know what your inspiration was behind the music. It seemed to me that it was kind of a mix between like Muzak meets drum and bass, which I thought was really cool. So yeah, I'd just like to know your inspiration behind that.
Yeah, definitely. When going into music, that was a huge part of our game. We paired up with a great team at Berkeley, and they were able to create some really amazing music for our game. And going into it, we had a few inspirations. We had some like glitch core because we knew we wanted the game to be fast and sort of in your face and have a lot of like bass and EDM vibes. But we also wanted the game to feel a little special. And so we kind of did a sort of jazz fusion. So a lot of the game has a lot of jazz music in it that is amped up, using beats and cutting and glitching. And so we wanted it to kind of feel unique. And so that's why we went with that. I guess inspirations, there's a lot of MF Doom inspiration with a lot of the way the beats work. So we focused on that along with a lot of other jazz artists and glitchcore artists. So that was kind of where that went.
Awesome, thank you.
Was there any challenge balancing the different types of movement systems so that you weren't just relying only on one?
Yeah, I'd say there's definitely a challenge in that when you have so much going on, like a wall run and a grapple and a rocket jump and so many different things that you can do to move around. Balancing them was hard and is hard since we are continuing development. We're constantly looking for ways to make each ability useful and unique in their own way. We did find through playtesting a lot of players didn't use the wall run all that much, or we found some players didn't use the double jump all that much. And so there's definitely that we want to focus on that as we explore level design and creating sort of positions where those are useful to use.
Thank you.
You have a very large group. This is less than half of the you, right? Yeah.
Yes, correct.
How were you organized and communicated? And were there any challenges with that?
Come on, it's a great
Yeah, well, a lot of the teams that went through Stout are actually pretty big. We have, I think the average number is like 12 or 13 or 14, so there's pretty big groups. And managing it is not easy, but I'd say as the game lead, I found that managing was a lot of working with people, not trying to control them in ways, but asking them how they want to be managed and understanding that way. So I guess we can talk to one of my coding leaders who did a lot of the management as well.
Yeah, so we heavily did a lot of stand-ups. Like that was one of our first things, and that's one thing that Stout does really well. They teach us about the stand-ups. Sorry, I'm not used to mics. They teach us a lot about stand-ups, and that's something that we just do on the daily. I would say besides that, though, we did a lot of communication just outside of class, whether it was through Teams or Discord or just personal messaging. There was always some kind of communication. And a lot of like the task communication, I'd say we actually had it all over, especially with now us getting into summer. We have a mix of just like spreadsheets versus just task boards and just note documents everywhere. And I'd say it's a constant struggle to try and keep everything in line, but I'd say we're doing the best we can with it. Thank you.
What was the inspiration for like the cat icon in the corner that's leading your escape?
So that actually traces back to one of the early wrist designs for the finger guns. There was Colby had designed one that had a little face that was projecting out of it, and I thought that was really cool, and I kind of latched onto that, and it became kind of my little personal love to concept out a little AI companion who would accompany you on your journey, helping you in the tutorial, giving you tips, and just kind of being a general ally, something so you don't feel so alone. And I kind of wanted to add something cute to the game.
Probably not with all those crazy Corpos robots after you, but nice, right?
What inspired the decision to go with using hands as weapons?
Tax laws and all that gross.
Yeah, I guess a few different things, but the main one is that I didn't want to put weapons in the game, and for Stout, I know that we also weren't allowed to have anything that was like above an E10 sort of rating, so we didn't want to have like her shooting a assault rifle or something like that. That just it also felt kind of wrong once we did all the concept art to have like guns, because this is a very cute and sort of comic book inspired game, so we wanted it to feel sort of superhero-y, and I think you get that a lot cooler with the handguns. I think it adds a lot to it. So.
Why are you called 2-minute games?
Good question. Because we want to make games that are fast and fun. So, 2-minute games.
Is that the actual reason?
There is another reason. Also, so basically every single meeting at 4:30, which was during our class time, we would do a 2-minute plank. All of us, like pretty much all 12 or 13 of us, would get down on the floor and do a plank on the ground for 2 minutes while listening to Phineas and Ferb songs. That's the real reason. Is everyone interested in doing a 2-minute plank? Because if you guys want to, we totally can. Yeah.
We'll leave it open to people at the end of the meeting, perhaps.
So one of the mechanics, one of the mechanics that I was very surprised about when I was first playing your game was that the grapple hook has a cooldown to it. That like you use one and then it has a cooldown, and it's not something that's like refreshed naturally. Like you don't have infinite. It's not refreshed when you land, which is usually in experiences with like other games with grappling hook systems, or like Celeste, where the dash mechanic automatically refills when you hit the ground. It was a very interesting decision to me. Something I actually grew to like. So I wanted to ask what made you decide that, and if so, is it probably just all the movement systems that you have in the game and not creating an over-reliance on the grapple hook?
Yeah, so the grappling hook actually was designed by Will, who is a co-program lead with me. He's not here today, sadly. He did a lot of the grappling hook movement. Dom did the slide along with all the double jumps and other features, and then I did a mix of the wall running, and Will also helped with that. And Will actually brought on the first day of class a demo of a grappling hook from a project that he did in a different class, and we really liked it and really loved the idea of it, so we kept it going. We found that players actually really overused the grapple, and so that's why Will decided to add the cooldown timer. So there's a lot of different things with the grapple. The grapple has been constantly changing ever since the first day of class, so it's been over a year, and I know Will decided to change it even more after SGX, but a lot of the design decisions came into how far should it go, how many charges should it have, how long until it actually like comes back, when should it come back. So it might be hard to notice from the videos, but the grapple recharges don't actually appear until you touch the ground again. This was a very unliked decision at first by the community, but I think a lot of people, after playtesting it more, they kind of understood it. But that is definitely one thing that we're going to keep working on, is really just the movement of the player to feel smooth with the community, because we want this to be a game for anybody from speedrunners to just your casual walk-in shooters.
After having gone through the whole project over the year, if you had to start over again, what would you have changed about your process or ideas to make it easier on yourselves?
That's a good question.
I think specifically one of the things that we all kind of agreed on by the end of, development this year was we should have kind of formed up around enemy design sooner. It was one of those things where we were all kind of throwing out these ideas. There were these very cool ideas that ended up either A, falling off to the wayside, or B, just kind of becoming not necessarily wasted time. Oh, a bit closer. All right. Not necessarily wasted time as much as it was time that was in a direction that wasn't I guess successful is the best way to put it. And so it's actually one of the things we're doing now going into the summer is we have kind of a style Bible, like we're all going to be working within these constraints. And so we're already kind of taking the lessons we learned and putting them back into the game.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it. And we're on Steam if you're interested for free. So go on and play and leave comments. We will definitely look into all comments because we want to make this game amazing. So
There also, on the Steam page, is a Discord link down there that you can join. It's our community server that we would love to hear any feedback, or that's also where we'll be posting future updates. Next is, Land of Lights.
Land of Lights. Ripple and Frog on deck.
I'm gonna represent Land of Lights. No? Oh, okay,
Testing.
Yeah, we switched midway through this event. Okay, that works pretty good. Is this clicker? Okay. Okay, cool. Okay. So we are the Land of Lights team, or what amount could show up for today. Our game is quick little. Oh, sorry. Quick little overview. We're a puzzle sci-fi fantasy game, E for everyone. And the rest of that you can read real quick and we'll move on. So play as Casta, a child who washes up on the coast of a mysterious island inhabited by these beautiful bioluminescent glowing plants. Sorry. And use the environment objects around to traverse through the island. While working your way through the island, you will find this little guy named Guppy. You save him from some of the diseased plants on the island, and you work together to help save the island from more of said disease. Using various different puzzle plants on the island, like a leaf rotating, mushroom jump. What do we also have? Vine grow. You work your way through finding these mysterious monuments and helping using them to cleanse various parts of the island. Yeah, use Guppy's ability to stop the spread of the disease and restore this once beautiful island. I think, yeah, that should be it. Do we want to bop over to the trailer? Oh, yeah, while we're switching. Sorry, hi, Howie. I am the art manager for the team.
I'm Jacob. I'm the programming manager for the team.
Hello, I'm Casey. I did various programming things.
And I'm Eric, and I was also And I'm Eric, and I was also one of the programmers on the team.
welcome to Land of Lights. My name's Howie. I'm the art. And I guess we can just let the Let's Play roll through while we answer questions. I'm going to be taking through a little playthrough, little behind the scenes, get to know some of our development process for about.
What is the reticle supposed to be like symbolized for? Because like it looks like a peace sign, but slightly like off to say.
So when you actually look at something that's actually interactable, it kind of unfurls out into a leaf. So when it's not unfurled, it's supposed to represent like a bud, like a flower bud.
Get to talking. Oh, I'm so sad.
What led you to making this game and not some other one?
So how Stout does our senior capstone games is initially back, oh God, how many, 8-ish months ago now? We initially did individual little pitches. From that, we refined down into small groups, about 5 to 6 people each pitch those again, and then vote on those, and then we end up with our generally around 6-ish capstone games. So most of this was just all of us went, yes, a pretty plant game, we'll work on that. That looks fun. I know I initially started on a game that was a, was it kind of like run around a mansion trying to like keep all the creatures from escaping kind of game. It was very different from this one, but. Washes up on this mysterious beach with this wonderful
Games where you have like a companion are often a little frustrating, having to deal with like another AI. Did that come up in design in like trying to mitigate that?
Yes, the companion AI was one of the big pain points in developing the game. There's a lot of jank that comes from just having AI be part of your control scheme. There were a lot of things that we had to do to overcome that. So.
I know also our level designer who could not be here today had to specifically test and work around the various like hitches in the AI with like, oh, is this pathway a little too, narrow so it can't quite like pathfind through, or there's one area where you go over this like rock ledge, and we had to put a little tunnel through it just so he could like for sure navigate through it, because we're like, I don't know, we'll just put a tunnel. Wedge the rock in there and get up here and come down through here.
So I'm blown away by the visuals of your game, but I do have a question. When it came to lighting a game that takes place entirely at nighttime, what were the struggles that came through with that?
It being too dark. We definitely had a couple different meetings with myself, our level designer, and our producer Liz, where we're like, okay, how much do we want to make this like true darkness, where it is very dark and you can only see very little, and how much do we want it to be more like sunset almost lighting? And I think in the end we struck kind of a good balance. It's a little bright still for my liking. It's more full moon than, a half moon. But yeah, definitely trying to make sure it was dark enough, but you could still see was like the biggest struggle with that. Yeah. I see another rock. Let's see if we have to wedge the seesaw again. Yes. Now we can give it light. Grab my little buddy here and make our way forwards. There we go.
I'm curious, these vines that we see in the Let's Play on the wall here, I saw in the trailer they had a very fascinating animation for like retracting when you add light to the area, which we're maybe about to see in a second. I'm curious how that was accomplished, if anybody here is able to share.
So I did work on that. Various different animation techniques I attempted to first. So imagine they're just straight up and down, I don't know, good 8 or 10 bones in them. Doing normal standard animation technique, pose it, animate it backwards, looked horrible. I eventually, after a little bit of research and a little bit of trial and error, figured out in Blender you're able to like snap bones to a curve, and then you can drag the bottom point of that curve downwards, and the bones will like slide down the curve. So I ended up just doing that. And initially I had it where there was like, I think 5 or 6 different vine animations. They're all posed differently. And after getting the first one in the engine, I went, I'm not doing that again. We're just going to use the same one over and over and rotate it. So we got a couple different areas to go here.
And actually, we did start off with a fog instead of like the vines, and I actually think the vines are a lot better. In general, they, what is the word, obfuscate less of the background behind them. And didn't you do all that like within the last few weeks, the vines?
Yeah, the vines were put in about 3 days before SGX, so what would that have been? Last Tuesday? Monday? Somewhere around there. Mhm.
Another question I'm curious about is what is the biggest thing that has changed from the beginning of development to its current state now?
I would honestly say our approach to how we did level design and map layout. Initially, this is actually our third map iteration. Initially, we had a much more linear path that had these very distinct zones and required a whole like separate asset production for each zone. So the first one was very plant focused, the second one was water, and the third one was disease. So that was a whole thing. After much feedback from the professors, especially at Megacrit, which was around December, they're like, was it February? In any case, they were like, cut it down, cut the map down, use what assets you got, just make that first zone. So then we pivoted from this very linear map layout to this one where you basically get like, here's the tutorial zone, you can kind of do whichever side you want, and then more of the island opens up and you can do a little more. And that allowed us to more modularly build on smaller bits and like, oh, we have enough time, we can add a puzzle here. Yeah, I think that would be our like biggest sweep because this map looks nothing like the first one we had. There we go.
Yeah, I think our main issue was that we had too many different mechanics. That was what we were told, and I think they were right. We were all kind of hitting a dead end with the puzzles, and while we were all really frustrated that we realized we had to change everything, it actually turned out to be a lot better. I think everyone was just like, oh, this makes more sense. We can keep going. We can like keep more naturally creating puzzles with these simple mechanics instead of trying different ones.
Yeah, I was one of the developers making the objects that you interact with throughout the map, and there was a lot of bugs that we had to iron out. The leaves that could rotate did not work when we did the fall SGX, and we had to just refactor them completely. They're practically unidentical. There's very little similarity between the old leaves and the new leaves, except the model itself.
So during your introductions, a couple of you called yourselves managers, and a couple of you just called yourselves the people that did the work. So question one, how did you make the decision as to who was in what role? And then second, what did you learn during the process of development, both from the managers learning how to manage and from the people being managed?
So the lead roles, which are producer, programming manager, and art manager, are assigned by vote basically towards the start of the development. So people vote on who they think is most fit for the role, and then the professors go, these are those roles. And then we are able to also fill out other roles as we see fit.
I'm sorry, what was the part 2 to that question?
As you developed the game and you practiced managing and you practiced them on people, what did you, the managers, learn about managing, and what did the people being managed learn about going through that process?
I can at least speak for the manager side. I think the thing I learned the most was listening to the people I was managing, making sure that I was at least hearing all their ideas, taking all their feedback in. Not always was it always used or whatnot, but at least I feel like I tried to make sure everybody felt at least heard. And then also just being organized with, okay, I need to meet with so-and-so today and talk about this, so-and-so today, talk about this, and just keeping that moving and everything. Because there were definitely days when I get stuck with one person. I'm like, oh, I still want to give attention to all the other people I got to talk to today. So I think time management as well.
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing on the programming side, making sure everybody's opinions are heard and at least get a chance to be implemented into the game, but also making sure that everybody knows what they're doing and that people aren't trying to work on the same thing and trampling over each other's work is another big thing.
Oh.
Our primary tool we use? Huh? Primary tools for communication. So our text communication, we primarily use Teams. We had a couple different channels for code-specific things, art-specific things, general things. And then we used, what was it, Hack and Plan for like kind of Scrum management, task card management, and that program I personally really like because we were able to assign people, add tags, do, what was it, like group breakdown. So is this related to Casta, or is it environment art, or, you know, so we could keep stuff really organized using that. And was there anything else we used? No, I think we had a Discord for some really tiny informal communication, but a lot of teams just messaging back and forth.
I'm a big fan of your sparkly water. It was just on screen, but it's not anymore. I want to know how you did that. Is that like a shader or a particle effect?
So that is a mixture of both. Or are you talking about the sparkly water like out at the ocean, or the smaller rivers of it?
Like the sparkly one. Like
Oh, okay. I know occasionally the ocean water catches a couple highlights and looks sparkly. Okay, gotcha. So it's a mixture of both a shader and a Niagara particle system. So on it, we do have like a water effect, and then there's a emissive particles over it to add some more of those like highlights on it.
That's cool. Is the water like the same base as the ocean one? Like the material?
I'm sorry, could you speak up a little?
Is the base water the same as the ocean, but just with like a particle then?
Yeah, it's the same base material, just I think we tweak the colors a little bit on it.
That's cool. It looks really good.
Let's try the rock trick again. Jump to put it in there. Come up here, say this little guy.
How often were you all in the same room?
2 days a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, every day for 3 hours a day together. We normally start most Tuesdays with a stand-up meeting, so we'd all, you know, what are you working on? What are you struggling with? What are you going to be working on? And yeah, so good 6 hours a week together. So we were in Michael's Hall. We were able to, sorry, there's a second room where one of the classes went to, and I forgot about that. We were able to have our stand-up meeting, and then there was basically these 2 rows of computers, and we'd all work there. So we were all within a good, 10 feet of each other at all times, which was super helpful for, especially if I was like, I have a level design thing. Turn to the level design person who's right behind me. Now we got this little area in here. We could see, some dead-looking plants.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
Ripple and Frog we've got up next, and we'll have Sun Shredder on deck. Is there any word from Club Crash at all? Okay. Sun Shredder, and for those, I think we'll probably just...
Hello.
Hello?
We have 2 mics. We got 2 mics.
Yo.
You guys,
Alright.
this is crazy.
You go first, home slice.
I'm waiting for the thing to go.
Of course.
All right, guys. What if there was a game where you could be a frog and a stoat in the same video game? Do I have the game for you? This is Ripple and Frog and the seasonal song. I'm Cole. I'm a technical artist. I did level design and other things.
I'm Madison Braun. I'm a gameplay designer, a programmer, and I mostly worked on the dig mechanic as well as some of the level assets and mechanics.
I'm Nathaniel Willius, and I was the QA lead. I mostly made sure to play through the game, test it regularly, as well as having testing documents to make sure that it all ran pretty smoothly.
And that's the whole team. There were not 15 other people who made this with us. Wait, how do we... Oh, we have a remote.
Yes,
oh my
we
God.
do.
This is so high-tech. So this is Ripple and Frog. It's
Eat
an
the mic.
asymmetrical co-op puzzle game. It's pretty cool. Oh, that's right. We have fancy transitions. I'm so sorry. Yeah, there we go. We made an asymmetrical co-op puzzle game. That means you're 2 little guys. You're in the woods. You're having adventures. You're cooperating. And it's asymmetrical, meaning that each character controls completely differently, which we'll talk about in a minute. We got seasons. We got songs. We got music. It's pretty sweet. Addison, would you like to talk about this also? Or Nathan?
Yeah, if you can go to the next slide here.
Oh, absolutely.
Actually, this is all you.
Oh, this is a me slide. So we had a really fun structure with this game, where the game takes place over 2 days and 1 year. And what that means is in every level, of which there are 4, you start in one season and you end in a new season. So gradually you are learning different verses to the seasonal song, and that travels you forward in time to the next season and completely changes the context of the level. So you go start in one season, you play in one way, and then you have to learn a whole different set of mechanics for the next season, but in the same space, which is a pretty fun structure. I think it makes the game pretty unique and cool. What is this slide? Oh.
All right, so for the characters you can play as, we have Ripple, a stoat that's got rhythm. We have the dig/burrow mechanic, which allows Ripple to dig into soft surfaces and pop back out. It can be used to travel under short gaps or up certain walls. And then Ripple's instrument is the drum that can bounce and shake objects immediately around Ripple, such as like an AoE. Next slide. Yes, you are. And then we have Frog, a fantastic froggy flautist. Frog has the jump ability, allows Frog to sail over obstacles and reach high platforms. This is much higher than Ripple can Ripple can hop out of the dig, but Frog's jump goes much, much higher. And then the flute, which can suck objects towards Frog and blow objects away from Frog. These asymmetric ideas not only help them access different parts of the level and work together to have to solve multiple puzzles, but in our opinion, Ripple is kind of like the little brother character, a slightly easier character to play, whereas Frog has to worry about a bit more platforming and a bit more using both of these mechanics. Ripple is for the more non-gamer to start playing as and help kind of bridge the gap between both types of players.
Yeah, we try to make them pretty balanced. I think it works pretty well. Like one has a dig, one has a jump, one has a flute, one has a drum. But yeah, I think I agree that Ripple's a little more like, drumming's a little bit easier than playing a flute. And I think that reflects in the way the characters play. They're both pretty fun. I think we did a good job balancing them, but it has a nice dynamic, especially if you're like a parent and child or something like that. Yeah. What's this slide about? We got cool screenshots.
This is showcasing the 4 seasons, where we start in the waterworks, where it is currently flooded because it is spring, and then after you change it, the water level goes down, which allows you to move on. Then you go to the woods in nighttime so that we can have a bunch of pretty fireflies and illuminated flowers, and then you change it to autumn, where everything's a lot drier and a fun surprise might happen that lets you get through the obstacle that was blocking your escape. And then we have the bog on the bottom there for both of those, where you enter it in autumn with all the pretty autumn colors, and then after getting through to the seasonal totem, you change it to winter, where it freezes over, and now you can ice skate across the entire bog.
All right, so if we want to play the trailer directly from here, or if you guys want to upload it, it's up to you.
Oh, okay. Right. Interesting. All right. That was our fun little trailer. We're going to steal the very good idea of doing questions during the gameplay footage, I believe.
Yeah.
So, if you have any questions.
I absolutely love what you guys did with the puzzle mechanics in this game. But it was interesting that you brought up the fact that like you tried to balance more like how difficult Ripple and Frog are. Did you ever like think that that would be a design problem, or did you ever have like puzzles where you're worried like, oh, this is a little bit too much for one of the characters and you want to try and balance those out? I'm just kind of curious on your ideas on the design process for that.
So one of the levels we Cole first created was the Wood Summer, and we had a lot of physics-based puzzles and that and whatnot. And then we presented that during the first SGX in the spring or fall, excuse me. And during the first SGX, we noticed a lot of younger players necessarily gravitating towards Ripple and seeing a lot of connection in that sense. Just seeing younger players kind of latch onto Ripple and have a much more, I'd say, entry experience to the game. So from there on out, while it wasn't a deciding factor, like we'll make everything easier for Ripple, it was very much a background decision in our head where like, okay, let's not make anything too complex for Ripple, while still balancing both mechanics of the characters and letting them contribute equally.
You're right, though. Yeah, it is kind of a cool design problem, designing cooperative mechanics that are also sort of geared towards different play styles, though, because, yeah, we do have one player who is a bit more advanced. So we do have to come up with clever solutions to things like, so for example, we have like a little boat that you drive around, and Frog is the one who steers, and Ripple gets to like bounce it up in the air, which I think is a really good, it feels cooperative still, but one of the roles is definitely more like, you gotta have dexterity and navigation skills, and the other one is just kind of like the fun, like yippee button mechanic. But I think it balances pretty well. Like we're seeing puzzles here where that you have them. Oh, that was fun. Where we have like players turning on and off water for the other players, and generally Frog is doing a lot of like platforming and timing stuff, where Ripple is doing more of the fun like digging up walls and like turning the water on and off. So. Yeah, it is difficult to try to balance the difficulty, but that's a good question.
So you use a mix of 2D assets and 3D assets. What inspired you to go with that approach?
That's a great question. We also have, I don't know if we've showed it at all, but all of our cutscenes are like this 2D theater puppet show kind of art style, which I think is cool. But yeah, the connecting thread between our two art styles is the characters, who are these like 2D sprites. I mean, my inspiration was I thought it would fit with the sort of storybook aesthetic we were going for. But the other reason is we just had a lot of 2D artists on our team. And we didn't have many 3D animators. So we were like, wouldn't it be cool if we had 2D animated sprites? And I think it turned out really good. I think it fits our art style pretty well. I think it's charming.
Was there any challenge meshing those two styles?
Yeah, definitely. I still want to have more 2D in the 3D levels. We have like the little 2D notes and the charms and stuff. We were planning on adding little sort of NPC critters like bugs and stuff that are going to be in the 2D art style, just to sort of make it feel more fleshed out. But because it's a little like 3D bias still, I feel. I think it also like it makes the players feel unique though. So yeah.
I will also say, and I don't want to speak on Cole's behalf, but our final level that we're still working on, we're planning to hopefully finish this game up over the summer, will be partially taking place in Ripple's hometown.
Yeah, we're going to have a bunch of little NPC characters in that level
exactly.
too. So that'll be fun.
And that's a very good chance to make a lot of more 2D assets and characters and what have you to help kind of flesh out the world of like, hey, these alive characters are 2D little funny little creatures.
Yeah, it is dissonant, but I think the dissonance is kind of charming. I think it makes the important things stand out, like the characters, because they're in like a completely different art style. But I think it also meshes pretty well. So.
Hi. So I have two kind of related questions. First, so this is single screen co-op in a 3D environment with various rules for, the players got onto this structure, the camera locks into a position. How did you approach preventing the players from going too far apart from one another? And then this is kind of related to that. For the platforming, like over the water, you have a failure state. You might fall in the water. How did you handle, respawning or responding to that happening?
Well, the camera was made by Daniel, who sadly could not make it tonight, but he did a very good job making sure that the camera can kind of adjust here and there for being too spread apart, but that was a big issue that we ran into for a lot of times. So one of the ways that we tried to help fix the getting split apart issue was to have multiple points where they can't progress without the other. So it's kind of like parts where you saw the one of them needs to open it up for the other one so that they can continue past, where Ripple might get stuck because he can't get past an obstacle without Frog helping it down for them, or Frog can't get quite up because something's blocked and Ripple needs to drum it out of the way.
Yeah, very much through level design is how we keep the players together. We try to design spaces that accommodate a camera well, and also spaces that encourage the players to be together, which is tricky because players like to wander off and run apart from each other. But also I think the camera bounds itself sort of encourages you to stay on screen. Players don't actually like not being able to see themselves. So that's kind of a nice sort of naturalistic feature. It is a nightmare though, like trying to get the players to be visible at all times. It's very manual.
I will also say we have a lot of checkpoints in case players, fall off and perish, not die, to help keep those players together and what have you. And on top of that, not only do for like edge cases, of course, we have it so when one player goes off, there's a little arrow like pointing to like, oh, Ripple's over here, Frog's over here. But on top of that, in like emergency game breaking situations, you can go to the pause screen and restart from checkpoint, which will spawn both characters back in one singular spot. So while, again, mostly through level design, through camera, through spawns, we have it really well done, but for those rare cases, we have the arrows and the menu respawning.
Oh, you had another question about water or something. I'm sorry, can you repeat?
It was more so for the respawn points. I think I kind of touched into that.
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of checkpoints is, I think, the answer to your question. All right.
So, why does Ripple or Frog put his hands behind his head? And like, are you planning for animations for when they play their instrument? I don't know if Ripple does it. I feel like when he drums, I kind of see his hands slightly move. That might just be me imagining it. But like, Frog doesn't have like an animation for playing his like flute.
That's a good question. Yeah, our animation, I think we're planning on adding a little bit more animation, specifically like walking forwards and like a playing the instruments animation. I think it was just a stylistic choice on our animator's behalf, like the hands behind the heads thing. I think it was a personality thing. He wanted to make her seem very like relaxed and confident, where Ripple's kind of like neurotic and anxious. Ripple very much like the Luigi of the pair. I stylistic. It's not because of the instrument. It's more like a personality thing. Yeah.
If I can be, this wasn't played in the gameplay trailer because we didn't show off the first cutscene, but the plot of this game is that Ripple is separated from their family due to a storm and watches down all the way down the river, ends up popping out in the fireworks where Frog's like, hey, I'll help you home. So the idea is you're kind of working your way back up the river to Ripple's family, which is kind of why Frog's this easygoing, silly little girl, and Ripple's this like, I'm stressed. I need to get back to my family. I miss them.
Yeah.
Kind of. The circumstances kind of build into their personality, if you will.
Yep.
Is that Frogger inspired gameplay?
It is Frogger inspired gameplay. It also has the bug in it that we have since fixed, where Ripple is completely frozen. I don't know why we included this
gameplay. Well, this gameplay video was taken like a week before.
Oh, that explains it. Yeah, this is Frogger inspired gameplay. Getting back to our roots here, with the original. Yeah, this is our unfinished level that we're looking at right now. Yes.
So, in one of the scenes in the trailer, comes up and you've got a thing that looks like a staff of music and like they're doing a duet or something. Can you describe that a little bit more? What happens? Is it a puzzle or?
Yes.
What?
So in each level, you learn a new verse of the seasonal song, which is how you sort of time travel into the next season. So we find these like magic totems with like music inscribed on them, and you have to play a little music mini game with your instruments. Pretty much every level, and then it becomes the next season, and then you can do things in the new season, and there's new context. So there's like a little music mini game each time. Oh, something's happening with their video. Oh, okay.
Yes,
we got it.
Yes, right there.
Yes, but yeah, that is what you're seeing. It's like a little mini game. It's just very like press the button when it pops up. I'm trying to play along with the song.
To kind of piggyback off that last question, I'm curious to know what your thought process and design process was around marrying the music and sound design. Did you kind of go really heavy into making the sound design play with your keys and your melodies within the music? Did you keep them a little bit more separate, or what was that kind of middle ground that you landed on?
Yeah, sound design was very important to us. We had some really talented musicians that we worked with at Berkeley, both with the music and with the Foley. But for me personally, the sounds of the instruments were super important. So I wanted to make sure that Ripple's drum was really responsive. You can't really hear it in this, but I wanted it to be fun to play the instruments, and I wanted the sounds to sort of reflect the experience of playing an actual drum. So even though all of the buttons do the exact same thing, they each make a different drum sound. So you can kind of make unique rhythms. And then the flute, it always plays in key with the song, and you can hold down different combinations of buttons to play different notes. It's this super dynamic, really ambitious sound system. And then our music is also pretty crazy. We have each level has the 2 different seasons, so it has the same theme but played in a different genre. And then in the next level, it'll carry over to the same genre of music for the same season, but in a new song. Our sound team is really talented. We were really lucky to get to work with them. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess while we're waiting on another question, just to expand on that point a little bit. For the controllers for Ripple, any of the 4 triggers can be used to play the drum. Each one plays a different note.
Yep.
And then for Frog, the left 2 triggers do the pull. Each one, same thing, but different note. And then the right side is the pull part of the flute. Again, same mechanic, but different notes to play.
Yep. So functionally 2 buttons with flute, 1 button with drum, but you can press different buttons to have different sound effects.
Same goes for
Had
keyboard.
some very nerdy music theory conversations with them about how to do that. It was super fun.
What medium did you use for the art of the animations of the characters and the intro cutscenes and everything? It looked like it was either watercolor or alcohol markers.
It is watercolor, yeah. We had a couple of our artists were physically watercoloring and photo scanning for those. It's pretty cool. And then we had this really dramatic stage lighting. I'm really happy with how the little puppet show cutscenes turned out. They look really nice.
You just had it go a little bit more forward. Yep. Little bit more.
Oh, you're going forward in time. We need to go back.
We'll know because there's the one.
Oh, you want to go to the other one?
Yeah, because we don't have the starting cutscene.
Oh, we don't?
Not in this gameplay video. AJ cut it out.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You can keep on going a little bit forward. You'll see it when you see it. Thank you very much for your help, sir. Any other questions, meanwhile?
Yes.
Oh, awesome.
Okay, so you clearly got to a point in development where you were running out of time and had to start cutting corners. About when was that process, and how did you decide which things needed to be cut and which things had to be shipped?
So we're planning on having 4 levels eventually. Hopefully by next fall, that'll be done. But yeah, our expo for the program was a couple weeks ago. So we eventually decided to just have the first 2 levels, and then if you beat the first 2 levels, you get to play a demo of the 3rd level that's unfinished. And that we were pretty on top of it. I think a couple weeks before then we were like, all right. Actually, I think a full month. We were like, we're just gonna focus on these first 2 levels, and then anything we get after that is gonna be extra. But a bunch of us are continuing development over summer, so hopefully we'll have that finished. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Is it Sunshredder now? Sunshredder?
Yes, so we'll be doing Sunshredder and then Club Crash, who both were unfortunately unable to join us, but we will be presenting their gameplay trailers / demos, and some of the stout faculty will be here to sing their praises and give us a little bit more context about the games.
Well, hello, I'm Seth Barrier. I am a programmer, the program director of computer science here, and I worked with all these games in the fall along with Kim Loken. And
I'm Michael Tutzloff. Was a CS instructor on the spring semester with Carl Cayley as the complement on the art side.
Yeah. So 2 of these teams were unfortunately not able to make it here tonight, but we wanted to at least show you their trailers and their gameplay content. So the first up here is Sun Shredder. And so the idea behind this is a game that marries both sort of God of War-like gameplay, where you are David versus Goliath versus these really big enemies, with rhythm. You are a guitar-playing sort of grunge artist from in the Pacific Northwest, and you have the sun has exploded and sent shards into the world, and one of them gets embedded in your guitar. And so the shards that are out in the world are corrupting all the other people. They either get turned into the yearners, which are people that are completely possessed by their desires, or they get turned into these evil bosses, of which there are 3 main ones that you have to contend with in order to get the shards back and reunite the sun back into a whole. And you do so because the shard is embedded in your guitar. You have to strum. You have to play in order to unleash your attacks or to block in time with the music. So why don't we start out with the trailer here? So oh yeah. I can talk a little bit to their process and what they created with the artwork. So I happened to mention when we first started the game that, hey, I learned this cool tech in UE5 over the summer called MetaHuman. Anybody want to know about it? And sure enough, I got a person from the Sun Shredder team that was like, oh my God, tell me more. And they really dove into that. And this really fit a very photorealistic aesthetic throughout the game. And so that's the main technology behind their main character. They really had to work with that to figure out how to animate it and turn it into their own, pose it with a guitar, everything else. This wasn't just to flip the switch and have it work. And then each of these main evil beings are based around occupations. There's the batter, the astronaut, and the magician. And they're each meant to represent the person's desires. They wanted to grow up to be that particular job, and they're really disappointed that they didn't. And so they get distorted into these creatures. And so a lot of time was spent creating and modeling each of those enemies and giving them also unique AI and play styles during the battle. But in the end, the gameplay was kept really simple. You strum to launch an attack, or you can parry an attack or dodge as an attack comes into you. So once you move into the range of the character, you want to avoid or dodge the attacks, or you can play on the beat to unleash your own. This one here is one of the just sort of average yearner characters. I think it's, I forget which ones are which, yearner versus, yeah.
I had that one
backwards,
there,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
I think that they use the color coding system where I think blue are the attacks that you're supposed to dodge, red are the attacks that you're supposed to deflect. And one of the things we had a lot of back and forth on is how to present that information. At certain points in development, they had the red beats and you had to deflect on the track at the bottom, and then what we found was players were just staring at that track and just playing it more or less as a very simple 2D rhythm game and ignoring the entirety of their 3D level and all this art that they'd spent so much time working on. So they really, maybe they still have some of those red marks on the bottom, but they really made an effort to try to communicate that information in the bosses like telegraphs as well, so that way the player can play the game really more like an action third-person action game, you know, and by reading what the boss is doing and responding to it.
We can also take some questions about this too. We were there for a lot of the dev. Oh yeah,
yeah,
Why don't we turn it
definitely.
up here so they can hear the signal? It's transitioning into the next level here, but. One thing that comes to mind, we knew that music was going to be really important with this game. Normally our teams only hook up with the teams that are out of Boston starting in the spring because they only have a semester for their capstone that they're working on. With this team, we did manage to connect them to an individual that had a band and was very interested in this overall concept early on in the process. Unfortunately, that individual injured his hand, and he was a guitar player. So they had to pivot in the spring and wound up still coming through with some really great music assets for us.
Does missing a note causes like the song or the background track to like change at all, like at least like feedback wise, or is it just that little like black miss? I don't think we're gonna see it because this person's pretty good at it, but when they miss a note, it just kind of turns into like a darkness.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. You know, unfortunately, they're not going to answer this question. I don't think that the background track changes. I mean, that's where, again, it's like a little bit of a, you know, it's sort of a rhythm game, but it's also very much an action game, right? You know, so, yeah, could be. I'm not.
I know that in one of the earlier demos, missing a note slowed you down. So you were kind of double punished for that. I kind of asked them to ease that up. I don't know what happened in the end, but that made it really hard.
That didn't stay in there, I don't think.
I guess as a question coming from the instructor's perspective, over the course of the year, what was some of the biggest shifts or changes in direction of the game that you saw, I guess, between the two of you?
I mean, there's a ton of iteration on the UI UX design. I mean, I think that's probably one of the strongest elements of this one. They spent so much time iterating on it. And like the final design, I think, does look like very polished, like, you know, AAA level, you know, sort of user interface elements here. So
I remember some of the earliest rhythm track things we were really concerned about. We don't want them looking off in the corner or down at the bottom. We want them looking right at the character. So they put it right on the character. They tried a radial sort of circle, and the rhythms had to come around the circle in order to see it come in. There were some of those that were a little buggy and were kind of swirling around, and we're like, that's cool, let's turn that into a mechanic. And I think for the December SGX, when they just had a prototype there, they had a button that I asked them to put in there where you could toggle between the two, and they could sort of A/B test with different people as they were coming through. In the end, the final version looks nothing like either of those. So, and this looks nothing like it did a month before when I was playing it. So they really took a lot of feedback on that and kept iterating on it, and the end result showed a lot of that effort. It feels right in all the right ways, the UI part of it.
I mean, something else that I worked especially with the coders on is really developing sort of like some modular archetypes for their attacks. You know, initially they just sort of had a separate like blueprint for every single attack, and then I was like, look, you know, a lot of these attacks are kind of sharing a lot of the same logic. Could we think about, you know, you've got like a spreadsheet, you know, a design matrix that has all these attack archetypes. Those can actually become code, and then you can just like swap out animations and VFX and little damage numbers and stuff like that to differentiate them. And they really embraced that. And, you know, one of the coders in particular, Ian, actually did a really nice job of spearheading that effort to have a really nice, you know, software design for that stuff.
from the gameplay that the strumming action is largely rhythmic and the same. Was there any experimentation with like different strumming patterns? Because as a guitarist, I definitely find a lot of joy in like doing change-ups, doing interesting rhythmic patterns. Was that something that was experimented with? And if so, what led to deciding to go with a more structured, regular cadence?
Maybe you want to take that because you were
Yeah.
earlier.
I think early on they were always wanting this very driving, four on the floor, almost kind of rhythm, always going, and the songs I think led them towards that. They kind of chunked it, but it was always a very regular rhythm. And I think part of the decision behind that, I did challenge them to try and find something that was a little more melodic or something that would have a little more variance to it. But I think it sort of got lost in all the different iterations and edits. And the simplicity of this allowed people to focus more on the full control that you have up at the top, because you've got to navigate this 3D space. You've got to see the attacks coming in at you. And so after a while, I never really felt the desire to push for more than that, because it was enough to absorb and kind of process all at the same time. But early on, I really did want them to have more rhythms going on. And I don't know that that was one that ever got responded to. I had kind of forgotten about it.
So I have a question. So I do music for a living, and I'm curious how it feels. I guess I'd have to play it to really know, but how does it feel to have to use your joystick, and because I'm guessing you were like pressing X or a button of some kind every time something's happening on the bottom of the screen there. So how did players find that relationship between the two? I mean, I guess it's not that crazy hard, but I'm still curious how that went in playtesting.
That's a good question. So since I was in the fall, we didn't do as much playtesting then, because we were just working to get the prototype out the door. But every time I felt it in my hands, you sort of just found that regular rhythm. Usually I was doing mouse and keyboard, and regular rhythm on the left mouse button to kind of find that, and occasionally throwing in a right mouse button. So it had that feeling of drums a little bit, super simple, but that you were just keeping a real regular cadence there, and learning to put that on autopilot while you were navigating around. It does keep you trained on the enemy, so it's sort of Z targets automatically while you're playing. So you only have to think about positioning yourself. You've got one thumbstick to navigate, and then the rest is just that automatic cadence. And I don't know how that came through with other playtests. Did you get any feedback from them in the spring?
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember if what the team reported. I know that anecdotally in my own play testing of it, I didn't feel like the controls themselves. I didn't feel like were problematic. Again, it was keyboard and mouse is what they were doing for this build. I think they might have plans to do controller support eventually, but it was again this sort of Z targeting style. You're just sort of like circling around the boss. So so long as you're sort of hitting A or D while you're strumming, yeah, it was usually enough. But again, there is always this tension between there's rhythm and then action. So all right, like the tension was. If you're focused on the rhythm, are you able to avoid the boss? Are you able to avoid, obstacles? I know for a while they had an issue where the boss could almost like stun lock you. And that got to be really frustrating. So like they really did need to balance that, giving the player enough movement freedom, but not too much. We also were struggling with, one of the things the boss can do is put traps down on the ground, and struggling to make sure that the traps were big enough and pose enough of a threat so that you did need to think about avoiding them, but then also not making them too much of a threat so that like it was too much stuff that you had to keep track of. So a lot of balance, and I don't, I think there's still probably, it's never quite done. There's always a little bit more that you can do. But I do think that they got to something that's pretty satisfying in the end.
This is less of a question, more of a comment to answer Josh earlier. I went and played all these games last week at SGX. Phenomenal, by the way. All these games are great. For this song, The Astronaut, they do change up the meter, the timing of the song, because you can hear like if you play the video or you play the actual demo, there's like a offbeat, and it
yep.
does require you to play or strum in the offbeat. And I was like, yes, that's exactly what I want. So when I saw this video, I was shocked. I was like, whoa, this is not the game I played last week. So, but fantastic stuff.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, so I think that the within a song, the beat is relatively constant. And again, that was, I think, somewhat intentional, so that like they didn't want to make it so that, again, they want you to be focusing on the 3D environment, so you can just sort of get in a groove with the strum pattern, and then not have to like pay attention to that as much as you're playing the boss fight. But each boss has its own rhythm, and they again had a nice software design for that too. They had a system where they could, I think in a text file actually, either a text file or a data struct, I don't remember which, they can define what the strum pattern is. And then they have this whole like attack queue system where basically the boss's AI will say, okay, I want to attack now, and it will then sort of put that attack on an appropriate beat within that strum pattern. And so again, had a nice modular design for that. I was very impressed with what they put together there.
Okay, thank you. Do you guys want to talk Club Crash? Yeah?
Trade off.
Hey there, I'm Kim Loken. I'm the program director for the art side of the game program, and I was team teaching with Seth in the fall semester for all the capstone games.
My name is Carl Cayley. I'm assistant professor. I was teaching the art side, paired up with Michael Tetzlaff for the second half of the semester, or second half of the year.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about the last of the 6 capstone games, which is Club Crash. So like the previous game, these last 2 have human protagonists, and so there were a lot of character development conversations in the fall, and this one, the pitch here is really embraces something that's part of our campus culture, which is that when we have back to school activities and we're welcoming our new students, there's this big event out on the lawn where all the clubs are trying to recruit people. And this game, like all games, exaggeration and and some fantastical action and mechanics. It kind of imagines that there's a really robust competition for attention between the clubs. So let's go ahead and let it play while we chat about it. So this is a 4-player networked game. And we really enjoy that the students bring unique questions and challenges to hardware and software development with their games. And we appreciate that the lab team helps us out with all the challenges around the network issues.
So your 4-player classes are the baker from the baking club, the farmer from the farming club. There is the cosplayer and the scientist. Each one of those has their main attacks and also their special attacks. But when you wander around the courtyard area, you can leap off the trampolines, the tents and such to find and attack your players.
Also really embraced marketing. They had a pretty robust TikTok presence because they had 4 characters to share in their marketing, and they really played up the competition between their characters.
something was unique about these special attacks is that they were painterly. So the particle effects that came off them might be the farmer would have flower petals scattering. The cosplayer might have a dragon character that would spawn out. Some of the pickups would include chocolate cake.
And this was something that the team did a lot of work on back in the fall to just develop that design hierarchy of what makes cartoon violence. Those are really interesting questions. We do design our games for a general audience because we have public events in our community where people bring their kids to play test the games, and the kids are the most honest critics. We also, as educators who are thinking about our students in industry and in the marketplace, how they could be applying for a range of jobs, and having a game that's suited to a general audience might also help to be appropriate in a range of interviews.
One of the early challenges in this project was planning out what the style looked like. There would be discussions about low poly or low polygonal objects, discussions about whether or not to employ a cell shader style and what parts of the pipeline that would come in. There was research that was done into the post-processing effects, into materials. Trim sheets were employed to make the textures repeat across the different buildings on the campus area.
A lot of color theory challenges with this game too, because of course color coding for the protagonists is really important to distinguish them for each other, still be legible for various colorblind profiles, and then also to have them stand out from the background. So there were many studies both in 2D and in engine. And I think actually it's kind of interesting looking out the windows right now and how the buildings across the street have a little something in character with the buildings in the game, right? And thinking about and with all the teams, right? That challenge of how materials look so different under different lighting conditions, and getting past what we consider an assigned hue for a material, and then like pushing it to where it's doing its proper foreground background compositional thing in the game, and making our windows gray instead of blue and that sort of thing, and just that's always a really interesting middle development challenge for every team every year. But I think when you get into a game where you also have this like team color coding, it really ups the challenge and the amount of study that's needed to do that well, and they did.
Some of the happy accidents that happened during development were when the trampolines and the tents were employed. You could find just the right angle to do a super jump, and that, I believe, was one of the factors that led to adding in a pavilion that you could jump on top of. There was a clock tower that was added that would ring every minute to give you a little indicator of how long the gameplay was going on. And a lot of the effects and the set dressing happened within the last few weeks to add in some of the balloons, the layers for the supplemental landscape in the distance with the pond and fountains and things. And here's some examples of the visual effects that would happen. They would happen very quickly with the special attacks, but you could somewhat color code and get a little visual representation of the baked goods flying across the screen, or the vegetables and things.
Audience questions.
Do you know how they ended up doing their networking, like peer-to-peer, client-server, or how they were planning on doing that?
Maybe our CS colleagues should come back up to take that question. Question about the networking.
Yeah, so they are using Unreal Engine's built-in networking systems, which we really encourage them to do. We had to, Sam, you remember with Grape Juice City, it was kind of a mess trying to do it from scratch in Unity. So
Very
we really
much.
tried to push them towards embracing that, and that ended up being very much sort of that sort of it's basically a client-hosted server. So there isn't any sort of, there's not a global server. Just one of the clients acts as a server, and then acts as host for all the other clients.
Yeah, I hear Grape Juice City was used as a cautionary tale for this year's classes. In that regard, couldn't be happier.
I know that this game underwent kind of an art style change sort of halfway through. I remember earlier on they were going to have a style sort of similar to Hyperpop, where it was going to be a lot more like 2D comic booky. I was curious about how the team sort of landed on this more like volumetric art style.
Fundamentally, how they landed on the art style, that they
Yeah.
they evolved a bit over the 2 semesters. Oh.
I can say something about that because I think I was one of the ones that sort of pushed it as much a little bit in the direction that they went. You know, we really tried to encourage them to sort of embrace that sort of Breath of the Wild aesthetic. Originally, they were having the cell shadder that's applied to the characters. They originally were applying that to everything, but they also had some really talented artists who were really good at, doing the substance workflow and getting some really nice higher fidelity environment assets. And we said, well, why let that go to waste? You know, and you're sort of flattening all that out with your cell shader. And so they ended up going towards sort of the cell shaded, stylized characters with a more high fidelity, but still very stylized environment art, with that sort of PBR workflow. And that, I think, ended up working out really well. And the visuals really popped for that, and they were able to use all the lighting features that Unreal Engine has to offer really to their full capacity. Do you want to add anything to that, Carl?
So these are college students who are having a whole year experience making the games, right? And early on, I remember there were potentially some disconnects because what we're teaching in class might be very high end, or it might be restrictive. And it was fun to watch them explore what they were taught and then realize that this game needs to be more stylized. And sometimes the models needed to be reduced in texture, reduced in polygonal density. And it eventually did come together to a cohesive style to maybe lighten up a little bit on how much detail was going into it. That was part of the low poly push. It was part of the, I think, the key to make the whole thing come together in a more cohesive style.
I asked this with the last game, but I'm curious, what were some of the biggest changes or shifts that you all saw throughout the year-long course of development with this game? Whether gameplay-wise or visuals or just some of the biggest pivoting moments.
I'll do one really quick. So I think, like I mentioned earlier, in the last few weeks, there was a huge overhaul. And once they hit the stride of knowing how fast they could make assets and change, it was exponential. You come in and it would be much improved. The understanding the bigger systems of lighting, once we had talked about ways of improving the shadows, it started to feel like a really cohesive place.
One of the big sort of changes maybe actually happened really early on, in that we were having difficulty understanding their vision. And what we saw was a game that was leaning in a little bit too much to the fighting style. And as they were looking for inspiration, they were looking to a lot of just very rough brawler kind of games. And we thought, so you want to make a game that's college students beating each other up and hitting each other over the head with frying pans and things like that. And we were worried that our chancellor would walk through and see that and be like, and so in the end, I think we just misunderstood their vision, but we had to sit down and talk with them a lot to really ask some tough questions and have some long dialogues about, do you understand why we're concerned, and what do you think we can do to address it? It worked out really well in the end because it helped us understand just how cartoon and Looney Tunes they wanted this to be. That was a term we threw out there once, and they're like, yeah, that's what we want. And we're like, oh, it kind of locked in. But there were some tough conversations that led up to that, and I think it was really important to do those early on. Once that was locked in, I feel like the game had its direction and just kept its eye on that.
And I think the way that they communicated that to us was ultimately through some really delightful, quick little 2D gestural drawings that were so effective in getting us all on the same page quickly. Things where you really saw this like super exaggerated, like the rake comes out and the rake gets bigger and it's spraying leaves and like. But when the students are also simultaneously very excited to be developing a 3D art pipeline, and both of those things are happening, and they need to happen simultaneously. It's easy to have the necessary range of exploration create some dissonance and confusion about what's floating to the top and why, and that's going to be a challenge on every team ever. But it just goes to show the value that some of those quick sketches have to stay in the conversation and keep everybody unified, including the executive producers who are dipping in and out of many teams instead of being singularly in one team. It's always a pleasure to bring all of the games to IGDA. Thank you for having us every year. This is a real victory lap. All of the majority of the students, there's a few who are like double majors who are back for another year next year, but the majority of the students here tonight graduated on Saturday. So let's have a round of applause for their accomplishments.
Wonderful. Again, thanks for coming. Thanks for having us. I kind of come from both sides of this, so it's like, thanks for having us. Also, I'm happy everybody's here. So that about calls it for tonight. So we're going to plan out where we'll be going afterwards for food and beverage, if you're interested. We'll probably try and get a head count, I assume. Oh, boy. Okay. Yeah, sure. Are we doing Applebee's? Probably. It's the easiest with this size of people. If you're interested in joining us afterwards, we will be going to the nearest Applebee's, which is about due east of here, like half a mile. You can check it on Google. By stream. Thanks for joining in. We've loved